Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again. A big draw for the Bond cinematic series has always been its incredible stunts. From Sean Connery forcing a Japanese somersault on a shifty driver in Dr. No to a helicopter corkscrew inspector, the Bond series has had the fortune to utilise the talents of some of the greatest stunt people and stunt coordinators in the entertainment business. Stunts can range from something as extreme as leaping off a motorbike, going over a cliff, or something, seemingly mundane but still dangerous like falling down a flight of stairs. And this video is going to count down 10 of the very best Bond stunts. Some housekeeping up front. This list is not going to include any vehicle stunts. There are stunts in this list that take place on vehicles, but they're not vehicle stunts. I mean, there are so many amazing vehicle stunts in Bond that kind of deserves a list all to itself. So, with that in mind, let's begin this countdown with one of the less impressive stunts of the series. For my dishonourable mention, I picked the tarantula scene from Dr. No, less so because of how it comes across on screen, but more because of all the behind-the-scenes chatter about how dangerous this was to do. Obviously, there are some shots of actual Sean Connery in here reacting to the tarantula strolling along a large pane of glass, but the shots of the thing actually moving along bare flesh is the flesh of stuntman Bob Simmons. Maybe it's because I used to own a tarantula and I know enough about them to know that they are it's pretty much impossible for a tarantula's venom to kill a human being unless in very rare allergic circumstances, or if one surprises you into falling off a ledge. So when you hear the people involved in the production talking about how much Bob Simmons was putting his life on the line and all this, the scene just comes across really silly now. It's a non-stunt being presented as this terribly impressive thing when it really isn't. On to more positive things now, though, with the mention of a stunt that just missed off a place on this list, the jetpack sequence from Thunderball. There's no doubt that this device is remarkable, but even by today's standards, never mind in the 1960s, and it's an impressive way for Bond to make an escape. However, Bond using a jetpack is so much more cooler in your imagination than it is in Thunderball itself. The stunt itself is great, but the presentation is quite poor. It doesn't feel special, and dare I say, it looks somewhat fake, which is a shame. Someone is pulling off an incredible feat here, and it sucks to just kind of dismiss it, but the quick edits and the dodgy back projection and just the lack of anything else happening don't do anything to make this feel terribly special. But still, it's an excellent stunt, just a bad presentation. So with that out of the way, on to the top 10. Starting off the list at 10. There has been much a parachuting in this series, with Bond, villains, henchpeople all partaking in some form or another every few films, but one of the more spectacular renditions of this particular stunt is Mayday leaping from the Eiffel Tower in A View to a Kill. The stunt itself comes as a great surprise to a first-time viewer. Bond has chased the assassin up the famous landmark when she takes her place and, making a noise like an old man getting out of a chair, dives through the air. Of course, a parachute is deployed, BJ Worth being the stuntman performing this particular stunt, and while it looks so graceful on the screen, there was actually a great deal of preparation needed to perform this. With the tower itself widening out towards the ground, it means anyone jumping off would only have a matter of seconds before needing to shoot up, lest they wish to die by a face full of cold iron. It's a great example of the stunt completely changing an action sequence in a really organic way. What was a two-person foot chase escalates into a car chase throughout the city of Paris. There's actually a really interesting story behind this stunt on the making of on the DVD, where a backup stunt guy really wanted to have a go at doing it himself, but seeing as BJ Worth did it perfectly in one take, they decided his services would no longer be required. But when a guy really wants to jump off the Eiffel Tower, who's to stop him? So he did, and of course got into an awful lot of trouble and never worked on a Bond film again. But hey, how many people can say they've jumped off the Eiffel Tower? Number 9. Of course, the Bond series is host to 2 fight sequences on top of a moving train, but Octopussy just ekes ahead of Skyfall for me because it really does go all out to do everything it can possibly do with this setup. Bond is underneath, inside, outside, and on top of a moving train. He's leaping onto it from a car, he's dodging things as they go past, they go in a tunnel, he's having a fight with bad guys, he's using elements of the environment to his advantage. It really does make the most of the very premise of the fight. Of all the various individual stunts that take place during the sequence, just the very sight of a man running along the top of a moving train is something to behold, but in terms of danger, one of the stunt guys, Martin Graysley, seriously injured himself performing the stunt along the side of the train, which goes to show you can't judge a stunt by its cover. I mean, to a layman like me, of all the things done during this sequence, this looks like one of the more easygoing stunts in comparison, so it's sad to hear that real lifelong injuries were obtained as a result of this. Despite the incredible stuff throughout this sequence, you are kind of pulled out of the reality of the scene by some of the less impressive back projection whenever they cut to a shot of Roger Moore. Obviously, I know that Roger Moore is not personally leaping along the top of a moving train, this is why we have stunt people, but if I'm taken out of a scene because it's so obvious that he never went higher than maybe a top berth on a train, well, that's a detriment, but it's an amazing batch of stunts all the same. At number 8. The pre-credit sequence from GoldenEye was an important moment in Bond history. As the first Bond film in 6 years, coming after a relatively lukewarm audience reception to License to Kill, it had a lot to prove, especially when it came to establishing a new Bond himself. So it's appropriate that the first thing we see this new Bond do should be to, well, take our breath away with a super impressive stunt. Influence from the famous parachute ski jump from The Spy Who Loved Me is very much felt here. The way the sound pretty much disappears as Bond is falling, bar some atmospheric wind whistling, and while the sequence is not in all one take, cuts are used sparingly and in service of showing off the scale of the stunt. It's an excellent way to begin an adventure, and the timing and skill of the guy doing the jump to withstand the tug of the bungee and then just calmly taking out a pistol, and then the timing of him disappearing behind the rock. It's just fantastic, but if it's so perfect, why is it only at number 8? Well, there are just a few more stunts that I think are even more impressive. So with that in mind, on to number 7. For all the perfect timing, perfect staging, perfect framing of that last stunt, the crocodile jump in Live and Let Die is presented so matter-of-factly that I'd quite enjoy it for a whole different set of reasons. Bond is trapped on an island, surrounded by encroaching crocs and gators, and in order to escape, he uses a set of them as a makeshift bridge, and then just, like, carries on with his day like it was nothing. If that was me, I would literally never stop talking about this. I would be literally hanging outside that building waiting for the villains to come out so I could shout, "Guys, please tell me you have CCTV in this place because what I just did was awesome!" Seriously, if I was Bond, Moneypenny would never hear the end of it. But Bond, being much cooler than I am, of course, just jumps in a speedboat and goes off to have a fantastic boat chase instead. The crocodile stunt was performed by Ross Kananga, the guy who owned the crocodile farm the filmmakers were shooting at, and he had to perform the stunt several times to get it completely right, and some of these outtakes show how nuts this thing was to do. The crocs were tied down by their feet so that they wouldn't go swimming off, but obviously their jaws and tails were still free and very much dangerous. I was stunned when I first saw all these outtakes, and the fact that Kananga didn't think that, you know, after this take or that take, maybe it's worth calling this quits. He was completely mad to do this, but it's a magnificently brave and maybe just a little bit stupid stunt that I'm so appreciative that we have here in Live and Let Die. Number 6. Octopussy is back again with a fight on a different mode of transportation, a plane. This is of course the climactic action sequence of the film, featuring Bond and henchman Gobinda fighting each other atop a plane in mid-flight. This kind of sums up what I love about Bond stunts the most. You could probably have done this entire sequence with studio inserts of Roger Moore and put a plane on some hydraulics and have it 10 foot off the ground and maybe get some models, but no, in Bond, if you want two blokes to fight each other atop a plane in mid-flight, you put two blokes atop a plane in mid-flight. Of course, the stuntmen, BJ Worth and Jake Lombard, names that you hear come up again and again when talking about some of the very best James Bond stunts of the 70s, 80s and 90s. They had parachutes concealed under their clothing, but the danger of being in such a situation is still very much present with those propellers and the chance of getting caught on something. Even though, much like another bit of stunt work that we'll be talking about coming up, the concealed parachutes are kind of noticeable, it doesn't take away from the incredible danger these guys were actually putting themselves in to shoot this. It's an incredible fight sequence and one of the best in all of Bond. At number 5. Another mid-flight fight here. Timothy Dalton's Bond and henchman Necros do battle atop a net full of opium bags hanging out of the back of a Hercules plane. Things are somewhat exasperated by having one of the most inept Bond girls ever at the controls of the plane, as she manages to screw up time and time again. But hey, we get a really great fight out of it at least. The pair are brawling and moving around the net, but then bags start flying and the weight changes, causing for some really tense moments even when the fight itself is over as the bag starts flapping around in the wind. This is the work of stuntmen BJ Worth and Jake Lombard again, but obviously there are studio inserts here of the actors fighting, but on a whole, I don't mind these inserts, and maybe it's because Dalton was always a more physical Bond than his predecessor anyway, so that helps with the believability, or maybe it's just because they look to be using matte paintings rather than green screen for the most part behind the actors, and that just kind of works better. But the sequence is really one of the highlights of Dalton's first 007 adventure, and a breathtaking bit of stunt work. Number 4. In a post-CGI era, it's harder to impress an audience with grandiose stunts, what with the more cynical of us just assuming that everything can be done in a computer these days, so why even bother sending up a man to do the job in the first place? Fortunately, series like Bond continue to keep real stunts alive, and after something of a rocky entry into the new millennium with Die Another Day, this sequence of Casino Royale serves to remind the audience what great real stunt work and practical effects are all about. So obviously there is some CG work at play to remove safety harnesses and the like, but none of that discounts the awe-inspiring stuff when Bond and Malaka do battle atop a crane. The fight is full of power and grit, and the camera and editing work perfectly together. You could probably make a top 10 video out of the number of stunts in this sequence alone, but the one that always really has my balls tense like they're about to be bashed in by a Hulk rope is when Malaka jumps from one crane to another, and then finally onto a building beneath. Like I say, there were safety harnesses removed with CGI here, but you really feel the weight as he touches down on that second crane, and yet he moves so gracefully, he could as well just be a cat leaping across garden furniture. This is like, he's 140 feet up in the air, doing an 18-foot jump onto a foot-wide landing space, and he just does it like it's nothing. I do think it's a shame that the final impact on the roof of the building isn't here. They cut away. I'm guessing that's because there would have been mats or something disguised as a roof to soften his fall, but hey, kudos for them for not tampering with the stunt with CGI too much or anything like that. I mean, this stunt is so good, it almost makes up for the horrific windsurfing scene in Die Another Day. Almost. At number 3. This is a stunt that I don't often see talked about. Perhaps it's because License to Kill is one of the less popular films in the series amongst general movie fans, but the bit where Bond water skis without skis must be the most underrated stunt in the history of the series, maybe because the stunt performer David Reinhardt just makes it look so natural. The bit that I absolutely love is when he actually catches up to the plane and is just speeding along next to it from the pure momentum of speed and then grabs onto it. It's unbelievable. I don't know if any of you have ever had the opportunity to give water skiing a go. I did, and I failed massively. I had all the gear, I had the skis, I had everything, and I just could not do it for the life of me, and that experience gave me a whole new appreciation for this stunt. I have no idea how it is humanly possible to do what we see in this film, but that's just one of the best elements about real stunt work, like when you're watching humans do things that are just so incredible. Number 2. I've cited the Moonraker freefall fight as one of my favourite action sequences many times before, and it truly is one of the most jaw-dropping sequences ever put to film. Taking place at the very start of the movie, James Bond is pushed from a plane without a parachute and then must catch up to a nearby baddie to steal one, and then fight off a pursuing Jaws. So up front, yes, the stunt people weren't actually in freefall without parachutes. They're hidden under the characters' jackets, and I use the word hidden very lightly here, and yes, when you've seen the scene a few times, you certainly notice a lot of the skydiving gear that the characters are wearing, but even taking those things into account, just the process of getting this footage was completely nuts. Stuntmen Jake Lombard and BJ Worth, once again, those guys rock, they had around a minute from jumping from the plane to shoot, so in the end it took 88 jumps over a period of 5 weeks to produce around 2 minutes of edited film, and just beyond the stats involved, I mean, they actually had to go out and either develop or source parachutes that were actually small enough to be concealed for the stuntmen, as well as a wide-angle lens camera that could be mounted onto the cameraman's head, and not be so heavy that it would could snap his neck when his parachute was deployed. But beyond all the technical things and the continuity errors and the fact that the studio footage of Roger Moore and Richard Kiel doesn't fit especially well, there is just something remarkable and extraordinary about a couple of blokes dropping through the air and having a brawl over a single parachute. It truly is a remarkable sequence, but there's just one more stunt left that I think bests it. Number 1. There are more intricate, more technical, possibly even more dangerous stunts on this list, and yet when it comes down to pure execution, presentation, and wow factor, The Spy Who Loved Me ski jump wins every time. Obviously, this is the climax to the film's pre-title action sequence. Bond has been chased through the snow by a bunch of Russian goons, and just when it looks like he has quite literally reached the end of the line, he skis off the end of a cliff, and the music disappears, and all we hear is the howling wind before a brilliant Union Jack parachute is revealed, and the Bond theme blares through the speakers. I love that it's presented as a single take. It just adds to both the magic and the realism of the moment. There's no hiding a fluffed action with a carefully crafted edit. There's no cutting to a miniature or a Roger Moore studio insert. It just plays like you're watching someone perform at the Olympics or something, and I just love that it takes the audience on a journey. In one shot, I think there are 3 very distinct emotions. First, pure shock at the initial jump off the cliff. Second, intrigue, puzzlement. What the heck is going to happen here? And finally, a good jolt of humour and joy as the punchline of the Union Jack parachute is revealed. This would not have had half the same impact if it was just a plain colour or any other designed parachute. It had to be a Union Jack for the moment to really work. Rick Sylvester performed this stunt, and he and the crew were waiting around for ages for the wind conditions to be just so that the stunt could be performed, and despite all this waiting around and presumable time killing that everyone had to do, no one on the production seemed to consider that, this guy is going to be taking off his skis in midair and then opening a parachute underneath them. Maybe we should account for that potential death-instigating risk. But fortunately, Sylvester was lucky, and the skis caused no problems. I just have infinite respect for a man who can fly off the end of a cliff, free himself of a pair of skis in midair, and then open up a parachute. It's just insane and brilliant, and this stunt never gets boring. It is a marvel on the first viewing, as much as it is on the 101st viewing, and for my money, the greatest single stunt in James Bond history. But do you agree? Please do let me know in the comments section below. Let me know if I've missed off any really obvious mind-blowing stunts, and please do let me know your own top 10 in the comment section below. And then if you would like to join in the conversation further, please do head over to my Twitter page, my Facebook page, and if you want to go one extra mile in supporting this channel, then please head over to my Patreon page to check out details there. And until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.